Good afternoon, everybody. It's a public holiday Monday, so thanks very much, Eve, for coming through and doing a presentation for us. So today we're going to talk about more on the event planner type side of things, and obviously it plays a huge role in an event where you've got an event planner and a photographer and a DJ and an etc. That they work together, and it makes for a much more harmonious event. I've worked with Eve for quite a few years, although not in the last couple of years. I really enjoyed the process that she went through. I loved the decor and the styling that she did. So for me, when I thought of a person to take this role or this presentation, she was the first person that came up, and I'm so glad that she said yes. So Eve, over to you. Let's start talking about planning and photographers and styling and events, etc.
Yeah, hi, thank you so much for having me. I think maybe what I should do is just introduce myself, because not many people may know me. And our industry is always evolving, which is amazing. So let me just share my screen. So I want to talk about the synergy between photographers and the planners, because it really is a match made in heaven. And I will tell you a bit why. But let me just introduce myself. I'm owner of Splendid Wedding Company. And I started my wedding planning, which then later evolved into design event business. So my company was opened in 2007. And this was pre-blog, pre-Pinterest, pre-Instagram era. And I think there was just a handful of wedding planners in South Africa, and I became one of them. And I was quite young, and I didn't know what I was doing. I had a lot of business experience, and I had experience in some events, so more corporate. But I was always drawn to the private event side of things. And I saw a gap in the market. I did some research. I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but it seemed like a good idea, at the time. And my husband was extremely supportive. And over the years, I've been incredibly blessed with the kind of work that I did, the kind of clients that hired me, with the kind of people I worked along the side, such as photographers and videographers. And as you can see, these are some of my accolades. So these are some of my top accolades. And honestly, none of these would have been possible if I didn't have a very strong partnership with wedding photographers. And that one of the Destiny magazines, Quentin, you actually be surprised that was a wedding that we did, the first wedding that we did together at Toadbury Hall. But how did it all start? Okay, so this is my family, and my kids, this was about 2 years ago. I don't have a recent photo with my teenagers because they don't like photos together. They like taking selfies. So my kids are now 17, 15, and almost 13. And my little baby over there, the 13-year-old, she's the one, I had her, and then I started my business. So she's like my little ticker. So this is my 13th year. She's almost 13, and my business is almost 13 years old. I kind of started off, and this was my first wedding, and I really looked for these photos. You don't understand. I wanted to put into the context how different the wedding industry was 13 years ago. How even this wedding it felt like such a big achievement. And very often designers or planners, they won't share their first wedding because it is quite bad. But I was very proud of this wedding because it was my first wedding, and it was a success, if not from the visual point of view, but from the planning point of view, but also a huge learning curve. My last event was on the 14th of March, and I got to create flowers for black coffee. So you've got to understand the growth. And in 13 years, I have weddings with massive budgets, with small budgets, with massive guest lists, with a small guest list, more intimate weddings, everything in between. But at the end of the day, what made me successful, I think, is that no matter client I was dealing with, they always got personal attention, and just my total commitment to their wedding as are, in a sense, that are you a celebrity, or are you a doctor, or are you it didn't matter to me. What mattered to me was their story, their beautiful story, the life story that we needed to celebrate on the day of the wedding. Started 13 years ago, and those fellow photographers and videographers I worked with at the beginning, I think our clients were very different. The stories were different, and the different. Whereas now there's a huge influence from, from the social media, and there's a lot more pressure to do data every single time. And that does influence what I do, and I think what you guys need to capture. From the wedding planning point of view, a lot of you probably work with wedding planners, but let me just touch on what we when it comes to my clients. And I pretty much manage everybody. Every single component of wedding work, what makes a wedding successful, and what is a wedding. And to me, it's not just about the way it looks. It is important, but for me, a successful wedding is where everything works, where all my suppliers kind of have this harmonious kind of like workflow through the day, where everybody knows what's going on. The couples are the couple is happy, the parents are happy, the guests are having fun. To me, it's more about the atmosphere of that celebration of the wedding day, not just the presentation. That's very important to me. And I get to work with venue, and each venue will come, depending on the size of the wedding, between 15 to 30 to 40 staff on the day. We're talking about caterers, we're talking about the bar. The more complex weddings will have a bar service to be brought in. And some more complex weddings, we have outsourced waitering and barman services. We're talking about the priests, and not only the priests, but obviously the rabbis or moana, in terms of, depends on the ceremony. We're talking about entertainment, not just the DJ. Very often now we have live bands, and live bands come with complications of tech riders and sound and lights and all the staging kind of equipment. So we're talking about photographer and videographer, because to me, you guys are the ones who are capturing that whole day, and we need to have a very, very good relationship in order to have this day captured perfectly. I mean, I'm sure you've been to weddings where you come in, you're just like, you don't know what happened. No one communicated to you the nuances of the day. And that's obviously, if you don't have a planner, you would be chatting to the client directly. I don't know, I assume. But with my clients, I spend a lot of time talking to photographer and videographer crews, just in terms of what is going to happen on the day. How many locations do we have? What is the best way to get from location A to B to C? We discuss the weather, the lighting, because some of the Jewish weddings, they happen at midday, which is probably not the best light for you guys, as you told me. And so we need to find solutions, creative solutions, so you don't come to the day and there's just, nothing's being discussed, and then you discover you're like in the middle of the sun. So it's very important from the wedding planning point of view to even communicate things like, there may be a father that passed away recently, so don't ask like, where's the dad? Those kind of small things. Okay. And then obviously your presentation, stationery, and all of that. So that's a snapshot of how we work with a client and what we manage on their behalf. When the client comes to us, they present us with a lot of ideas. They tell us who they are. Some of them will have a very clear and distinct sense of style, what they're looking for. Some clients sort of very undefined, and it is our job as planners and designers to take their story, take their ideas, and extract it out of them, and then bring it into life. And the idea is always not to copy sort of your Pinterest board, or copy, oh, this is a beautiful image on Instagram, let's do the same thing. The idea is always to create something new, something exciting, something that hasn't been seen before and becomes completely couples own. 3 years ago in 2017, actually today, and that there's a reason why I chose this wedding, is because it was definitely one of the highlight weddings of my career, but it's also happened exactly 3 years ago. And I think what we discussed in terms of this presentation is kind of to share uh, starters go through in order to create a picture perfect wedding for our couples, and just the process that we follow. And then obviously we can talk about the design process ideas, but then comes 2 days before the wedding, and now we need to set it up, and now we have discussed, and all these expectations that clients have from us translated into reality, the 4 seasons. And with each wedding there are very important components, and I'm sure kind of, you know, formula. We have to make sure that our bride and her bridal party have the correct type of flowers. We have a ceremony to create, normal stuff. So your flowers would be your bouquets, your buttonholes, your corsages, flower crowns. Those photographers that do shoot Jewish weddings, you'll know how sometimes you have like 15 bridesmaids or 10 bridesmaids, and you have like 15 flower children. So from wedding planning and design, we need to make sure by the time that that ceremony is happening, everybody has their flower. Everything's being pinned, and flowers are a live element, and we can't pin those flowers too soon because they're just not going to look great and cocktails when you are taking those photos. So it's very important to communicate the designer, if it's just a florist, if you don't have a plan, if it's just a florist, what time are those bouquets getting to you? Because very often you have your beautiful bride, you're doing your beautiful portrait, but there are no flowers, leaving them at the church. So just small things like that would probably be important. If it's summer months, I would say actually going out of style now, and a lot of weddings we actually don't do the those for men's jacket and those, and it's December or January, and you've taken your see that the flowers are just not looking great because 200 people came and hugged this groom, and now flowers all like dead. I'm a planner at the wedding, so we're just doing the design and the flowers. I would always reach out to the couple, but they do forget, and a photographer, just to say it's all for the reception. Like, lose them, they're done. They simply cannot last that long in South African heat and withstand all hugs that people would then give the groom. So just something, if you do have a planner present at the wedding, then the planner should be removing those flowers before the reception, or have a replacement, because you the speeches in your photos where the groom is giving a speech and there's like this dead rose. And those are the kind of things that as a wedding planner, when I photos from photographers, I study every single wedding that I do. And once I receive these photos from photographers, I literally I'm very critical, learn from, believe, and then for the next time you make sure that you note those little nuances, so that later on the next wedding can be even better and better and better. So the ceremony, this is the one that I think is quite tricky and very important for you guys, because very often it's during the day, and this photo was taken in the morning, so by the afternoon the shade has moved in the shade, which is, I think, is quite important. And any decorator watching this and planner, you need to go to the venue 3 or 4 days before your setup, just to see what those shadows are, just to make sure that wherever you're going to see your guests, and where your ceremony is going to be, ideally it should be in a shade. Okay, then we got our cocktail area. This is usually when you guys are taking photos with a couple, but this is the area that our guests would be spending and doing their thing. And then obviously the reception. So this wedding, the reason why it was my favorite wedding was because we got to transform the Four Seasons ballroom into something that has never been done there before. And it was an exciting project. It was quite nerve-wracking. And it really did transform the room. And it was a surprise for the bride, which was quite amazing because the groom and myself worked together on just giving the bride this amazing experience, because when she walked into the hall, like she didn't expect it. She didn't know that this is going to happen. And
I
we
can't
were
believe
lucky
that you
enough.
put that, you know, that whole sort of centerpiece from the roof there. I can't believe that that was inside. That's incredible.
Yeah, and I mean, as you can imagine, you do your sketches, you talk to the engineers, because from the safety point of view, we had to make sure that the structure was very solid, strong, that you know, it was safe. For we had to get a sign off from the engineer. Obviously the hotel was very insistent, and obviously we had to work very carefully, because the ballroom, you know, the Four Seasons is so finicky. They really want the ballroom to be in a perfect condition, so we couldn't damage anything, we couldn't scratch anything. It was a huge pressure, and we had an amazing crew that worked on it. And it took us, so this photo that you see where the guys had just laid out the grid, the aluminum grid, it was taken at about 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning the day before. So, and 24 hours later, it was already all up and done. So in my own weddings, we push and we try and we really do 98% of the time complete our jobs by 12 o'clock. Why 12 o'clock? Because if your big stuff is done by 12 o'clock, you've got another hour to hour and a half to sort of go around and just make sure that everything is perfect. What a lot of photographers don't know is that some venues will only allow us to get into the venue by 10 o'clock. Some of them 12 o'clock, depending if it's a restaurant and they are doing breakfast first and then they turn the venue into the function venue. Some venues have, and actually we are challenging them on that decision, because if you have a 200 people setup and you're only allowed to start at 10 o'clock, it's incredibly stressful to kind of complete the big job and be on time. It actually doesn't matter how many people you have in your crew, because if you have small space and everyone kind of tripping all over each other, it's actually not great at all. So we try to, on the bigger projects such as this was a big project. The client had to pay for the previous day venue hire in order for us to be able to complete our job. But even though we arrived to the venue at 8 o'clock, the Four Seasons got a very difficult delivery entrance, which means bringing in these beams and trusses. I mean, it took 3 hours just so we could start. And that's another thing, is delivery entrances at different venues vary with the way we can actually bring in our equipment, our furniture. We do calculate that into our logistical setup always, but there can be days when the lifts are broken and then you have to carry everything up on the stairs. And, you know, we do plan and pre-plan and replan, but things do happen, and that's part of events. Here's our crew working. So we will always split the crew. There will be somebody setting up the ceremony. There will be someone setting up the cocktail hour and then the reception. And this was the wedding sort of towards the end of it. So once the lighting was done, once we actually completed everything, it was complete transformation of the ballroom. And when the bride walked in, I think she just walked in and was like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm in a fairy tale. And that was a beautiful memory that we've created for Laura. Her name is Laura. And it's something that stays with you for a very, very long time. So this wedding was on the 29th of April, 2017. And 2 days ago, we were packing everything, cleaning all the decor, briefing, talking to everybody, you know. We had Estilo was the main photographer for this wedding. Then we had Verve Films who filmed the wedding, and then I asked my very good friend Renska Marie to come and take decor shots for us. And I actually really wanted to bring this wedding for a reason, because I think it was actually quite a bold move to invite another photographer to your setup to take photos when you have an amazing lead photographer. And in 2017, it really did cause a bit of a rift. But let me just expand on that a little bit, because it's not something that was done to upset anybody or to do anything, because I worked with Estilo for a very long time. I think they're amazing. We have a very good relationship. The reason why it was done is because it was such a big and important project for us. And that was also the time where Instagram for marketing. And what I've realized, that because I worked with so many photographers, and by that stage I had 300 weddings in my portfolio looked a bit badly put together. I don't know how to explain. There was no flow, because every photographer that I work with has a very distinct style, has a very way that they edit. And when I try to kind of put it in one portfolio, it sometimes clashes, sometimes doesn't work. Some photographers favor more like saturated look, or some shoot more naturally, some are more staged. So, you know, my portfolio wasn't flowing, and I struggled to actually post on Instagram and have like a cohesive look going on my own social media. So the reason why I invited another photographer is just because Renske and I have become really good friends over the years, and she started taking a lot of photos of my work, and her style and my style looked really good together. And for that reason, I needed to continue the look and feel. What we also do is, very often we don't show a lot of weddings on social media. And sometimes I actually sign a non-disclosure on certain events that I do, and we are not allowed to have not even one photo from that event. But if I bring my own photographer just to do the decor, there are no names, there are no people, it goes into our portfolio, and it's only seen by those who come into our studio. And where a lot of what happened in the industry at a certain point, and I'm not ashamed to say it, but there's a lot of copying that was happening, you know. So if someone does something and someone copies it, and why this was happening, it's because we were all of a sudden exposed to the possibility of what was happening in the world, and then somebody will figure it out in South Africa, so then more designers would go and planners will want to put it into their weddings. It's a natural thing. It happened. And I think if someone copies your work, you should be flattered. I do believe that. And you know, I'm the first person that anybody can phone and find out from me directly, how did you do this? I'm very free with sharing those resources always, because I believe that if we all do better in our events, the growth will only be beneficial for all of us.
Also,
So
the whole standard of the industry will be raised as well, which I think is a good thing at the end of the day.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think we are behind the world, and it's very sad to say, but it's true, given what's happening in Europe. And I've been actually doing a lot of online courses in this time, just learning about the materials that are available to them. A lot of those materials are not even available in South Africa. So when you are looking at certain pictures on Instagram as a bride and you attracted to a certain presentation, in South Africa, we don't have that specific material even available to us. So we have to figure things out. We have to get a lot more creative, and maybe, you know, with each wedding, me figuring something out, and then my colleagues figuring something out, and so it goes. Together, we can actually figure out amazing things and push ourselves forward as an industry. So that I inviting own photographers. So it's not always just Renske. There are other. I just felt like it was somebody who was more aligned with the style of Splendid wedding. Yeah, help to up internal portfolio, not the one that I necessarily share online, but the printed materials that we've created. So yeah, so there you go.
I actually think it's a really good idea, because you know, then especially if you are a stylist.
Yeah. Do you have any?
And you have you know, planning facilities, or that's what you do. to have a coherent theme, I think, is really important. And if you've got the same photographer or photographers that work with you, you know, that's the thing that's gonna sort of flow through it. I've got a client who does some decor as well, not on this level, but they've also started looking into that now as a, you know, bringing us in, shoot the decor, and that's it, just because they want to have you know, pictures that are not from their cell phone, etc. And I think it's critically important if styling is your business.
Absolutely. And you know, it is overseas, it really is. And if any of you guys shot overseas with the bigger photographers that we all see, they're different teams that are assigned to different things. Because I think in South Africa, so when I started my business in 2007, I had to be a planner and a designer and a florist. You know, you kind of wear all these hats because there was just nobody else. The industry has evolved since then. We have different ways of working now. The freelancing force is definitely taking off in our side of things. I'm not sure about you guys, but for us, I don't have to employ 10 florists permanently. I can draw on a freelance base kind of resource that is available and bring amazing florists to a big project. It's just, you've got to look at your business, and your business is definitely going to evolve from where you start to where you're going. And photography and videography now, they are such important tools to communicate the brand's image. You've got to use it. And you know, I also feel it's unfair, as of, say, you're a florist or a planner, to just expect the photos from the lead photographer as a given. I think I'm sure you guys probably have a lot of discussions about it. And I think this is where I will also talk about the communication and processes and partnerships between the brands, the companies. But the reason why I want to share my process with you, because over the years, I got to understand the photography and videography process quite deeply by working with photographers. And I also know that every single photographer out there will have a very different process. Some photographers need to come back from the wedding and actually decompress, and they can't even look at the photos. And I also know there's another set of photographers that will literally come, you know, and they start editing. I know those guys too. Everybody's got a different way of working. I plan weddings differently to other planners. I design weddings to differently to other designers. And everybody has their own process. And I think when you start working with a specific planner, it's very important to sit down and share your processes and how you do things before the wedding, during the wedding, and after the wedding. What this will help the planner understand is that they cannot phone you the next day and say, do you have a photo? Do you have a photo? Can I have a photo? I need to Instagram this photo. And, you know, and we just have to all respect our ways, because as a planner, you work with a client for 6 months, sometimes 18 months. With the COVID-19, we will be working with the same people for 2 years. So our process with them is a lot longer. Our engagement with the client is a lot longer. We get to almost understand them inside and out. So by the time the wedding happens and we are physically involved and we're tired, and now this wedding is done and we can breathe, what the planner needs to understand, and the florist, is that that's when your job only starts. So you guys obviously, you know, have your own kind of just share your processes with the planners. So our risk factors, so what we need to share with you is obviously our setup time. Every single venue will allow us very different time. So I know some photographers sometimes will send us their schedule and say, we come in to take decor shots at 10 o'clock. Well, if we only got into the venue at 10 o'clock, we can't do it. And then there were suggestions, we'll set up one table. Unfortunately, it also doesn't work, because some setups, and I'm talking about more complex weddings, and obviously with the smaller weddings, it is very easy to just put one arrangement on a table, place cards, and it's done. I'm talking about where we have to do the flooring first, where we have to layer the tables, where we have to you know, it's kind of, we set up in layers in order to kind of go as fast as possible. So sometimes that's not always a possibility to set up one table for you to take a photo. We have setup issues where the lifts are broken. Anything can happen on the day. We can plan, but then the rain comes, trips the power, then the venue has to fix the power before we can start setting up, and it's just always traffic and delivery entrances, and difficult clients. We also have a situation sometimes where the client comes in the middle of the setup and starts discussing and making changes. And it's happened to me before where I had a 300 people wedding, we set up the floor plan, we did everything as discussed, and then the bride's sister came and changed everything. So we had to take all the flowers off, we had to redo the floor plan, and, you know, change it. We sometimes have to, at the end of the day, the client, they are who they are, and we have to do what they want us to do. Let's talk quickly about the creative partnership and why the 18. Over the years, my business model has changed. At this moment, I specialize in exclusive luxury weddings, and we would probably do about anything between 8 to maximum 15 weddings a year, depending on the complexity. So that means that when I started off and I was doing 45 weddings a year, it's a very different kind of client base. And when I was doing 45 weddings a year, I got to work with 45 photographers, for example, at least 30 photographers, and they were the same. Now I literally work with 2 or 3 photographers per year. And I think at one stage I kind of lost a bit of touch with a lot of people, and a lot of photographers asked me, well, why do you not choose me, or why are you not booking me? And I think it kind of almost coincided with your ideal client being attracted to the photography that was done with a specific photographer. And I think this is where, as much as friendships are important, strategic partnerships are more important, because as much as you can love a specific photographer's work and really adore everything about it, you also may have a client that might not slot into their processes as well as others. So for example, maybe certain photographer would be quite a long process from wedding to images. And I know for a fact that that client is not going to be prepared. The client sitting in front of me, they already stated they're not prepared to wait long for photos. So then you have to look at another photographer that would be better suited to them. And remember, we also look at the clients based on their style, how they presented. Are they more glamour? Are they more natural? We have to match the photographers based on a wedding that we are planning. And there's sometimes the clients will book the photographer first and will ask for recommendation. In turn, the photographer will then recommend the planner that they enjoy working with, or it goes planner photographer. And that's where I think it's such a beautiful partnership, because you really can build something amazing together over the years. But you have to understand each other's processes. You need to be able to be honest with each other. You have to be able to support each other. There's so many times where, you know, you kind of have like a disaster in the background, and then the photographers come in with their cameras and they're like, hey, how's it going? And you're like, my life is over. And the most amazing thing is that the photographers who've got your back, they're actually the calm ones. They're like, it's okay, you just deal. What do you need me to do? And very often what I just need them to do is to keep the bride busy. So if the bride doesn't ask, where's this, or can I come and see, or where's Eve, the photographer's like, everything is fine, let's go and take photos. And that really helps, because in that half an hour we can resolve anything. But yeah, so we kind of have to have this kind of relationship where we support each other. At the same time, there's been situations where the client would be very unkind about the photographer, and then it would have been also my role to step in and actually, you know, point out to the bride that X, Y, and Z. Let's look at the facts. Let's actually be realistic about what happens. So we do have to support each other. And a good partnership before the wedding, the planner and a photographer will discuss the weather, the transportation arrangements, all the nuances. We have photographers that come from other provinces, from Cape Town, from Durban. So it is actually a planner's job to make sure that everyone's got accommodation that is close enough to the venue. It is our responsibility to make sure that you guys have transport, that you know where you're going, and to over communicate the nuances of the day. Okay. And then post wedding marketing strategy. Are we going, is this a very marketable wedding? Are we going to put it online? How are we going to do it? It works a lot better if there is a strategy involved between the creative partners, because then your reach is more and you actually go higher in that ranking in terms of Instagram, and which of the weddings we're going to submit to the big blogs, to the magazines. Okay. And then some ideas, if you are new to this industry and you're looking to get into wedding photography and you want to reach out to someone like myself or other planners out there, I would say research in terms of your style and their style. You will be able to see on their Instagram or their website what kind of style, wedding style they favor, and then reach out to them. And I can tell you something, that I can be very guilty of this, especially pre-COVID madness. In season, I'll get some emails and I would look at someone's work and I actually do like it, but I just run out of time to reach out and type out. Sometimes a phone call is better. A WhatsApp is great, but do reach out. And if you don't hear from someone, it's okay to follow up. It's not that they ignored you because they didn't like your work. I think when you are in business for a bit longer, you lose that insecurity a bit, and you kind of like, if someone doesn't like my work, they must tell me that they don't like my work and I'll leave. But until they say they don't like my work, I will keep on persisting. You know, I've submitted a lot of work to this one magazine, and eventually they published it. And you know what? I realized that in a lot of magazines, the turnover of staff happens. Who's going to see your email? You have to follow up. If the email that you sent it, the email address that you send it to, is that the main email address? Is that the important email address? You've got to follow up. Don't just send an email and think, oh, well, I've done it. You know, follow up, phone calls, Zoom and coffee dates. If you like someone, invite them for a Zoom coffee date during COVID, or for a coffee date later on. Just chat, see if you get along. Styled shoots I think are going to be back again. They were quite popular and then they kind of like fizzled out. I think they're going to become a bit more popular now, because we all need to kind of work and show that we have been working in this time, and at the same time, more intimate weddings, styled shoot type of weddings are going to happen. That's a bit of a prediction on my side, where we might not be able to have these big weddings, but we will be able to style a bride and a groom, and maybe they're very close people, and give them that kind of very exclusive style shoot experience, whilst we're waiting for things to go back to normal. Brand shoots, those are actually really great in terms of not just shooting the flowers that I make, but actually shooting my face and kind of blending it into the rest of my branding. A lot of creatives are scared of the camera. They are scared of being on it. They are so intimidated. So if the photographer can actually make them feel comfortable, then absolutely. And then I think you guys, photographers, have a lot of workshops. I've been invited to style photographer workshops, which is where I actually met a lot of photographers. So look at florists and planners to help you out with your workshops, because you can actually invite the planners to your workshop too. So they can just, not even for the whole workshop, but maybe have like a little mingling at the end, you know, like a networking session where people can just chat to each other and meet each other. And then wedding decor shoots, which we discussed about in terms of actually coming to the wedding and shooting the portfolio wedding shots. So yeah, so I hope it was okay. Got the notice of 30 minutes, so it's like, okay, let's just go through it, because I know there are questions. So yeah.
So I think first of all, thank you very much. That was pretty cool. I know that things have changed a lot, certainly since I started shooting weddings, and I think I suppose the gap between a non-styled wedding and a styled wedding has gotten quite big. You know, so I maybe you just want to give us a bit of insight into that side of things. How big is the sort of styled wedding part of the market, or is it actually not as big as I think it is?
You know, it's interesting because I think in 2017 it was definitely going that way, and especially in Johannesburg. We got to remember something. We got the Cape Town market and we got the Joburg market.
Don't worry, I switched you off there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, unless you got more slides.
No, I don't have slides.
Okay.
But am I still on?
Yeah, you're still on.
Oh, there. I was like, whoa. Okay, so we've got a Cape Town market and we've got a Joburg market, two very different markets. Cape Town market tends to be a bit more international. You've got a lot of people coming from overseas, and we've got a Joburg market, which is actually extremely affluent market. We are talking about people with a lot of money, and but a lot more conservative, as in, even if they do have the money, they will not necessarily spend a massive fortune on the day. It's always restrained. They would rather spend on the experience of the wedding as opposed to necessarily the entire presentation. And so we do have very different markets. So yeah, I think the bride or a couple looking for a specific wedding, they will do a lot of research into available planners, and they will look per venue through photographers' portfolios, and they will kind of find somebody who is most aligned with what they're looking for. And I think with the Instagram, the boom of Instagram and oversharing of these luxury weddings, yes, at one stage there were a lot of requests for that, and couples absolutely want it. However, the reality of the price that comes with that wedding is also something that clients had to consider. And I think in Johannesburg, what we do is we actually look at creating specific features as opposed to have 20 features in one wedding. We will have like one statement feature or two statement features. A lot of our venues are not really not great for like hanging florals. In Cape Town, you have a lot of venues that got beams and you can hang things. We don't have that. We are not allowed to do that. And what I showed you were those trusses. It's extremely expensive to do. Time is not always feasible. So we have to just kind of create other things. So I think with clients, the reality of installations was as real as the need for them. And you know, it all depends on personal spending power and willingness to actually spend it on a specific feature. So we are always able to provide the clients with options, but it is up to them to say, yes, it is a priority, or no, it isn't a priority.
And the size of weddings. I mean, I think it does obviously depend on, again, the Johannesburg versus Cape Town. I think, you know, there's probably a discrepancy there as far as the size of weddings. But do you often get just small weddings that really want to go way out, to helicopter trips and flips and whatever in the Drakensberg? Or, you know, I mean,
I would love to do more of those. Not really. I mean, my one wedding was actually with Jackie Burnacall. We had to go to Madikwe, and it was a Canadian couple that came to elope in Africa, and that was actually such an amazing experience. Went to Madikwe, we had a wedding like literally in the middle of the bush. I thought we would be like in an enclosed area by the restaurant or like the lodge. No, we were 40 minutes away from the lodge in this place where I still don't know how we're all still alive, but here we are. So I've done a couple of those, but majority of my weddings lately have been 200, 300, 500. Also depends on who you work with. The Muslim weddings and Jewish weddings tend to be bigger. They tend to go into 200s and up, whereas I think your Christian weddings are a lot more smaller. But to be honest, my last 130 pax wedding was in 2018. I don't know, I started off with weddings that were 60, 80, and I think it's just where you find yourself at the end, or who finds you and presents you with numbers. I do feel that there's been a growth in numbers over the last 2 to 3 years. A lot of cultural factors play a big part. Even with weddings where you have a traditional wedding and then you have your white wedding, you still have a lot of pressure from the parents to invite more people. And I think the guest list is never ending discussion between the couples, and a cause of stress for everybody, because a lot of our venues don't actually accommodate large numbers. We only have a handful of venues where you can go for 200, 300 and so forth numbers. So we are restricted by our venues in Johannesburg and Cape Town as well. Just a handful can accommodate. But I do think after COVID, we will be seeing more intimate gatherings. It's just, it will be interesting to see.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think in my experience, the nicer wedding venues tend to be a bit more boutiquey, and the ones that, you know, need 500 people are more sort of conference related, which I suppose makes it a little bit more difficult for you if you've got to try and create something that's more of a custom bespoke experience.
Absolutely.
You know,
and you know what, this goes very, very close to the design and cost of design. So if you have a couple looking, and if you're a photographer and you're suggesting venues, what is very important is to see the ratio of negative space in the venue. So if you have a look at the Polo Room in Nanda, very high ceilings, very big space. So in order to decorate it, you will need to have a client with large spending power. Whereas if you look at venues where the ceilings are low, you're going to put something and it already immediately fills the room. So the size of the ceiling is so important, because in order to put things into perspective, you need to drop the line of sight. I love working at Red Ivory, but it's one of, like, honestly, my top venues. I love the people there, just the absolute presentation of the venue. But one of the biggest challenges there is the high ceiling. And you can put something really big in there, but it just kind of dwarfs and doesn't look as impressive. A lot of negative space. So I think for the clients who are going to go for that amazing presentation and they want some kind of like cascading something, the size of the ceiling is very important. Can you hang things from the ceiling? And your boutique venues already give you a lot more character. So what I mean by character, if you go to Morels has a lot of statues and carpets and a baby grand and beautiful couches, and there's a lot of texture. Everywhere you look, there's something. So that's what we talk about when we say character. Certain venues, you have to bring in everything. You have to bring the bench, you have to bring the couch, you have to bring the chair, you have to build your character. And those are the venues where you need clients with spending power, especially if they are looking for kind of look and feel. So for clients who are more on a budget, they need to look at venues that already have a lot of beautiful character around, because then they don't have to spend as much on the decor. Whereas clients who are prepared to spend, they can play around and look at whatever venues they want, but understanding that we will need to build a character.
Absolutely. And then one more question regarding, let's say, because you'd think that a wedding in the middle of Nambiti Plains in the Drakensberg with, 20 people, I mean, that's not really going to cost a lot. I mean, what are the logistics in doing something like that, where you literally are in the middle of the bush? And that's it.
I think definitely transportation. So if you're looking at your helicopters, we've priced helicopter flips and that. Remember, it also works on the weight ratio. So you've got to know everyone's weight. You need to know how many helicopters you'll need. It's a very exciting project, and some things that unfortunately for me, my wedding in the Midlands with the helicopters and that was postponed. So I was very sad, but done the homework behind it. A very exciting project, and you have to almost look at it as a holiday. You have to look at this 20 people literally going away on a, even though it's in the same country as we do, but you have everybody's interest. You have to plan your timing very, very carefully, and you need to understand the comfort levels of every single guest. Cost wise, that means you are responsible for those guests. And I think on the more intimate weddings that we've done, I found that the couple would then want to carry the cost of those kind of experiences. They wouldn't want to say to the friend, oh, well, come to my super exclusive amazing weekend away in a Drakensberg, but like, by the way, it's going to cost you 50 grand. I think those kind of exclusive weddings are often plan very differently. We negotiate with the resort, first of all, because they have to give a good rate for out. It has to be sort of your Thursday to Sunday, possibly even Monday event. So you are looking at like this amazing getaway. You're looking at, and depending, just something very important, depending on your guest list, you might have a chef. You might have to fly, or not fly in the chef, but definitely get the chef come in with the crew to cater for the such exclusive guest list. You're looking at bringing in your suppliers. So whenever you travel, you will know that the client needs to accommodate you and your assistant, and not just on the day of the wedding. We have to cost the fact that you would probably need to be there from, like, say, Thursday, Friday. So you're kind of looking at your suppliers becoming a part of that celebration in a way, because they also not just commit travel and all of that. So things are very exciting, but they do come with a lot of responsibility. And I think that route definitely needs a planner who coordinate all of those logistics.
Okay, cool. The line is a little up and down, so I think what you can do is probably wrap it up. Eve, I want to say thank you very much for giving us these insights. I think it's quite important, for photographers, especially wedding photographers and event photographers, to understand the process that goes behind it, and the fact that the bigger the wedding, the more logistics there are, and you can't just sort of say, well, this is my plan. I want to shoot the decor at 10, and then I'm going to do this. You need to fit in with the bigger picture. So yeah, thank you very much for coming on, and maybe afterwards jump onto the Facebook discussion there and see if there's any questions that you can answer, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you. But just before I go, I just
Yeah.
want to reach. It has you guys, and I think
Sorry,
sometimes
Eve,
we work with a lot of.
Go back 15 seconds and start again.
I just want to reach out and to say it is a creative partnership. It is about me allowing you to do your best work, and you allowing me to do our clients the most phenomenal experience. I've worked with a lot of egos in this industry, and I think anyone who's ever met me, they will tell you that. So if you feel like a planner may not be providing you with enough information or stepping on your toes or whatever, just tell them, because sometimes we might not be aware where like it is key to a successful relationship. Communication is. So if you need the planners to hear something, tell us, so we can adapt our processes to make sure that everybody's allowed to do their best work possible.
Cool, fantastic. Thanks, Eve. Appreciate it.
But thanks so much for having me. It was fun.
It's a pleasure. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.